As game masters, we often lean into adventure-heavy stories, not just because they're fun, but they're also the easiest to write. Some evil force threatens the rec center, the town, the world, and our characters get together to defeat the bad guys. Fill in the blanks and you're good to go. Rinse, wash, repeat. Campaigns based around this sort of adventurous conflict also tend to be the easiest to run. You establish a clear direction, like getting the MacGuffin, stakes, life or death, rec center, etc., and a clear win condition, beating the bad guy, usually all within a single sentence. It's straightforward, the solution follows a set of steps, and as long as everyone's on the same page, you can get through just fine. There's a shared language and understanding when it comes to adventure stories, which is why tabletop RPGs and video games all default to violence. Similarly, it's straightforward, easy to understand, with a clear winner and loser. But that's not the only kind of story there is there? In fact, it's only a very specific subset whose solutions don't always cross over. After all, Alice didn't chokeslam her way out of the looking glass, now did she? Comedy, romance, crime, mystery, horror, melodrama all manage to make compelling narratives, but can throw off GMs when they're planning their stories. It can even be a reflex to respond to a bad roll or nebulous situation with they attack in order to get back to something familiar with clear rules, but I want to push for something more. I found a few useful tools for helping to think like this, and they all kind of boil down to one thing. If One Punch Man was here, could he solve this? Now you might use Superman, Godzilla's breath, or just some sort of item where you can just kill the bad guy with no need to attack. It doesn't matter what the vector is, the result is the same. If the problem can be solved by hitting something hard enough it turns into a pink mist, then that's an adventure story, and these can get kind of repetitive after a while. Non-adventure stories don't depend on this. If the fate of the world depends on getting two awkward teenagers to fall in love, well, Superman's not going to be terribly useful now, is he? Some systems directly address this knee-jerk reaction to violence within their setting and rules. If you don't want to try to implement less adventure-based solutions into your existing game, some systems will actually directly address this within the setting and rules. Wanderhome by Jay Dragon is a fantastic example of this. The story of the game is a bunch of Redwall-esque animal folk returning home after a long journey. Simple enough. There's no dice, usually no game master even, and the playbooks can't use violence to solve problems, with one exception, the veteran, which has provoked a lot of interesting discussion online. That playbook is the only one that can use violence to solve the problem, and they have to retire immediately after. This mechanic directly reflects the game's ethos around violence almost never being the answer, and by creating true stakes for violence, or even taking it off the table completely, it provokes very interesting responses from players. If they're surrounded by bandits, they might try to talk themselves out of it, just hand over their gold, or maybe even recognize one of them as an old childhood friend. All of these are, in my opinion, way more interesting than rolling initiative and slaughtering a bunch of bandits. Less cleanup too. But if you want to try to work less violent, more creative solutions into your existing adventure game, there's plenty of ways to do that too. When planning a non-adventure storyline, you'll still need direction, stakes, and a clear win condition. For this example, let's imagine a turn-of-the-century city. There's an evil politician consolidating power, making themselves a de facto king. Now, there's no crown, they're not even the mayor, not even elected, just a government bureaucrat who's embedded themselves in a position of power through a network of favors and well-placed decisions. So much so that the actual mayor, governor, the president needs to ask their permission to do certain things. Now, specifically, this person is not physically or magically capable. In fact, they're kind of frail. Their actual power comes from the network of favors and laws they've lobbied to have passed, and the allies they've granted some influence to. So far that sounds bad, but not evil, so let's up the stakes. Let's say he's bulldozing orphanages and low-income housing to make room for its roads and parks. You know, let's give this person a name. I'm thinking, Robert Moses. Now, there's a few ways your players might depose Robert Moses from his position. Violence, maybe sneaking into his house to murder him or running him over with the city bus, is going to be one of the first things your players think of. They've got a laundry list of ways to separate his atoms, and he's got one hit point on a good day. So we need to establish from the get-go that killing him is off the table. Make it known that his death will result in a power vacuum. Every career politician and criminal is going to be striving for a piece of what he had, harming lots of innocent civilians along the way. Putting him out will also put a price on the player's heads from all the allies that he had. So any direct violence to him is not just political suicide, it might be literal suicide for the players. Plus, if the players get caught, they're the ones that go to jail. After all, Robert hasn't broken any laws. He wrote them. This is where, as a game master, you'll need to provide some alternative methods for your players. What can they actually do? Perhaps there's some compromising blackmail to be found, a young, plucky politician willing to stand up to him, or an obscure legal precedent from a long time ago. Maybe they could unionize those orphans or get a muckraking journalist to smear Robert Moses' name. Also leave the space open for player suggestions. Just because they can't get rid of him doesn't mean they can't make his life a living hell. How the characters will use these tools will be up to them, but without a viable direction, they're going to feel frustrated and helpless. Just like real life. We should also build up our stakes at this point. Maybe the next orphanage is going to be demolished in a few months, he's going to double everyone's rent, or he's going to pass a law to outlaw dogs. The characters and players have to care. It doesn't have to be life or death, just whatever pulls at the player's emotions and will spur them into action. This is where knowing your players is good, but knowing their characters is better. The rogue who grew up without their parents is going to be just as mad as the puppy-loving druid, but for two very different reasons.
I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
You can excuse racism.
Now finally we have to ask, what is our win condition here? Maybe he's blackmailed into submission and forced to retire. That plucky young politician gets elected and robs him of his influence, or he just can't get any more laws passed. He might actually end up in jail or living free without the dignity and status he fought so desperately for. Maybe he just goes crazy from all the rats you hid in his apartment. That's still a win. The point here is to mark out in your mind and the mind of your players what potential victories could look like here, since they're probably used to the battle being done when the body stopped twitching. As another tip, make sure your players can track their progress. You might use something like the mood tracker from Wild Beyond the Witchlight, or clocks from Blades in the Dark in order to show the progress of public support or someone's emotions. The key here is a tell so the players can see if their plan is working or not. This will help create the stakes and actions that will drive engagement with the story and keep the game propelling forward. Think of it this way. Keeping these influences secret would be like getting into a combat without knowing if your attacks are hitting or how much damage you're doing. In the same way your characters would notice if a baddie is winded and bleeding, they should notice that the matron of the orphanage is opening up to them as it becomes clear that they genuinely care about these children as much as she does. It would be incredibly frustrating to realize you have made no progress because of a requirement you didn't know existed. The characters are in the story, and while they might not know that an NPC is halfway to becoming an ally, they'd be able to read context clues in the way that our players can't, because our players can only interact with the world through their character sheets. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments below, shoot us an email at biscuitwolfgames@gmail.com, or find us on Blue Sky at Biscuit Wolf Games. You can also find our own supplements and games at our itch.io and on DriveThruRPG under the Biscuit Wolf banner. We'll see you next time.